Welcome, 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 everybody. I am so incredibly excited to have, everybody who's here with me tonight, including you out there. We are going to be exploring Justice Reimagined, restorative justice as a path to healing and system transformation in Virginia. And this is an incredibly exciting event for me because I am a huge proponent of restorative justice. And I just cannot believe the crew of people that we have here to educate me as well as all of you here tonight. So I do, before we want to do this, give a shout out to all of our incredible partners, Restorative Arlington, CFSY, as well as, I have family behind me, everybody. Everybody say hi to Jen. CFSY, Survivors for Justice Reform, and EJUSA have all been incredible planning partners. We'll hear from all of them today and on the 18th when we do episode 2. I also want to just make a quick clarification. Good ideas often come from multiple good people, which is why VJA out there also has a thing called a campaign called Justice Reimagined going on right now. These are two separate things. Please, everybody, check out their campaign, Virginia Justice Alliance. Justice Reimagined, great campaign. Everybody check that out. This is a separate thing. We just happened to land on part of the same name at the same time because it's a good idea and we should reimagine justice. And that's what we are going to be talking about tonight. So we're going to have a really amazing panel of people here with us. We're going to learn kind of what restorative justice even is, because I don't think most people know about it. I know a lot of people inside who really, where this is most important, not the place where it's most important, one of the places where it's most important, really don't even understand this concept. And it's because it's so different. It is justice reimagined. And to help us understand that, some people who have been practitioners and have gone through this process from multiple points of view will be sharing their stories tonight. This is learning through humanization. That is what we're going to be doing. I am particularly excited to have with us Charlotta Evans, who is a national activist, an advocate, and a survivor, and is currently a member and affiliate with CFSY. We've got Eddie Ellis, who is co-director of outreach and member services. He joined CFSY team in early 2018. He works with ICANN members across the country, connecting them to each other and with local resources. He also works with other directly impacted communities, including the family members of juvenile lifers. Eddie, a native Washingtonian, was arrested and charged with murder at the age of 16. He was later found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 22 years in prison. He served 15 years and finished the rest of his time on parole. Eddie came home in 2006, and since that time, he has worked on a variety of issues, including reentry, solitary confinement, and on behalf of people with disabilities who are in the system and coming home. He served on the board of directors of a national legal organization and helped with client-centered training for lawyers, probation officers, and social workers. He's an advocate for those in the system, a mentor, and a motivational speaker. His lived experience as a formerly incarcerated person provides invaluable insight and depth into his work that allows him to connect with and engage the community he serves. Eddie's amazing. I cannot wait for you all to learn even more than that incredible list of all of the things he's doing. Amanda Carrasco is also with us. Amanda is someone whose journey truly embodies the heart of restorative justice. She's a powerful advocate, survivor, and storyteller who believes in the power of truth, healing, and transformation. These are common themes you'll see tonight. Through her lived experience, she's come to see RJ not just as a concept, but as a life-changing path forward. Today, she'll be sharing her personal story and why integrating restorative justice into our conversations around harm and accountability is more important than ever. And I will second that. I think it really is right now at a time where we all need some healing. Felix Rosado is co-founder of Let's Circle Up, a restorative justice educational project, and author of Justice from Inside Up, a restorative justice education facilitator's manual. In 2022, Felix narrowly escaped death by incarceration via governor clemency after 27 years. While inside, he also co-founded the Coalition to Abolish Death by Incarceration, earned a bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary studies from Villanova, which is a phenomenal school, and served in leadership with the Alternatives to Violence Project and Inside Out Prison Exchange Program. Today, Felix serves as program manager of Healing Futures, a youth RJ diversion program with the Youth Art and Self-Empowerment Project, teaches RJ at Chestnut Hill College and Community College in Philadelphia, resides in Southwest Philadelphia, and is the proud father of Jubilee, born a week shy of his 2-year freedom anniversary. So congratulations, Felix. That's fantastic. And then Erica Washington is going to be explaining a little bit from EJUSA tonight. She is the senior restorative justice strategist there. She's studied American punishment system for more than a decade with an interest in transformative models for addressing harm. For the past 5 years, she has worked with communities across the country to build restorative justice diversion programs to address harms of violence through non-punitive responses. Before that, she spent 3 years with the Center for Death Penalty Litigation, defending people on death row in the American South. All right, all of that, all of that is just incredibly inspiring and way more than any of us have really dreamed of doing in our lives. And so I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn this over to people who know better. Very first thing we're going to do is we're going to learn a little bit about what is Restorative Justice Circle. There's going to play a little video that actually does a really good job of introducing it, and then we're going to hear from Erica. So why don't we go ahead with that video, please?
More than half of victims of violent crime don't even call the police in the first place. They prefer nothing to everything we have to offer. The vast majority of crime survivors' pain goes unhealed. What the existence of restorative justice means is that we can no longer pretend we don't know what else to do. As a country, we're really good at punishment. It's passive, it doesn't require people to act, to think, it certainly doesn't require them to change. When we lock people up, we excuse them from their responsibility to answer for what they've done. Restorative justice is a process to hold them accountable. It's a tool. People take turns answering questions like what happened, what needs arise, whose responsibility is it to meet those needs, and how is that person going to do it? It requires someone to take responsibility, to repair things as much as possible, and to never commit that harm again. This isn't about feeling sorry, it's about doing sorry. Things like go to school, get a job, pay restitution, apologize, do community service. Restorative justice practices have been used to address low-level infractions like vandalism, up to addressing the impact of murders on the surviving family members. Restorative justice processes are first and foremost about meeting the needs of people who are hurt. Sometimes the person who can make the greatest contribution to a survivor's healing is the person who harmed them. To come through trauma, we need answers to our questions. To say, my life was never the same after you hurt me like that. Crime survivors want the most safety possibly available. So if incarceration actually produced safety, we would have the safest country in human history. That's not what we have. The core drivers of violence are shame, isolation, an inability to meet one's economic needs, and exposure to violence. And we bake those into prisons to try and keep people from committing further violence. Incarceration exposes people to exactly the things that increase the likelihood that they'll go on to harm others. People who are hurt deserve a process that will help them heal. People who are responsible for crime have an obligation to be accountable for that. All of us deserve responses to crime that actually make us safer. Our current criminal justice system doesn't deliver any of those, and restorative justice at its best delivers them all.
Yeah, it's a whole different way of thinking about it. And I would like Erica to go ahead and explain a little bit more about that for everybody. Please, Erica.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Taj, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. I am so grateful to be on this call with so many incredible people. So I was asked to really quickly walk through what a restorative justice process looks like before passing to our incredible panelists to really explain why they chose to move through such a process and how they were impacted by such a process. So I think this will be the least interesting part of today's session, and I'm going to move as quickly as I can. I will share my screen here so at least folks can have a visual in case that is, supportive for your learning. And so just give me one moment. All right. Can folks see what's on the screen there? Okay, fabulous. And so I just want to start by saying from the beginning that a restorative justice process varies depending on the needs of those who are closest to the harm. ultimately what the process, in whatever slight variation it takes, is meant to ultimately do was just discussed in that video, right? It is meant to ultimately create the space to explore what happened, to explore the impacts of what happened, to explore who was impacted by what happened, and to explore what can be done now to make things as right as possible. So however the process looks, we want to really get at what I just named. What happened? What were the impacts? Who was impacted? What can we do now to make things as right as possible? And so for us, that typically looks like a process that comes in three parts. And so that's what I'm going to speak to really briefly right now. And so the process starts with preparation. From preparation, we move to a conference, and from the conference, we move to plan completion. And what preparation typically entails, and it can often be the longest part of that three-part process. But it's going to, of course, start with trained facilitators meeting one-on-one with the folks who are closest to that harm, right? So that typically includes people who have been harmed or a person who has been harmed, people who have caused that harm or responsible for that harm. We want to include supporters. We know that harm ripples out to our loved ones, our neighbors, our friends. And we also might invite additional community members in, but that can look different depending on what is most desired by the folks closest to that harm. And so what they're going to start with is just explaining what restorative justice is, because this is very new to the vast majority of people. And that's both explaining what it is and what it isn't, right? So you might start by explaining that this is not about punishment for punishment's sake, like our criminal legal system, right? This is about addressing harm and the needs that harm creates. And so upon really explaining what this is and getting folks like voluntary buy-in and interest in at least continuing to explore what a restorative justice process could provide them in their lives, the facilitators are going to work with each of them somewhat individually to prepare to come together into a facilitated dialogue if they ultimately choose to do that. And so with the responsible person, you're going to want to explore accountability, right? Not just saying I'm sorry, but really understanding the impacts of one's actions and therefore what repairing harm could actually look like. We don't have a criminal legal system that really gets at like truly how was someone affected physically and mentally and spiritually, and therefore how can we actually repair harm based on how someone was impacted by what happened. And so you're gonna, as a facilitator, work with the person who was responsible to really try to like think about how might someone have been harmed and impacted by what I did. You might explore questions like, how did your actions likely impact them? Or what patterns or circumstances in your life contributed to this situation? And how might we address those? And I include that second question because every survivor I have ever met wants someone to repair, but they want to ensure that it does not happen again. So a restorative justice process, if it's worth anything, is going to explore what contributed to this harm happening in the first place. So those are the topics that a facilitator is going to work with the person responsible to really excavate and understand. And with the person harmed, right, they're going to create space to explore what happened and to explore, like I said before, what were the emotional impacts of what happened? What were the physical impacts to you of what happened, the spiritual impacts to you of what happened? And from understanding how you were impacted, what could repair look like? So that might look like a desire for some shift in behavior to be demonstrated by the person who caused them harm. It might look like just a sincere apology, the acknowledgement of how their lives have been impacted by what someone else did. It could look like assistance with a medical bill, but it's in preparation that facilitators work with the folks close to the harm to understand, what happened, who was harmed and how, and what could be done now. And it's there that everyone becomes prepared to step into that facilitated dialogue, that conference that you see on the screen in the big circle, right? It's at the conference that they come together, they talk about what happened, they talk about the impacts, they talk about the needed repairs. The person who's responsible tends to express accountability, while the person who was harmed shares in order to one, just explain how they themselves have been affected and their loved ones have been affected, but also to explain so that we can shape what repair might look like together, right? Everyone in that conference co-creates a plan to address the harm to the extent possible and to address root causes. And it is the person who caused that harm who will then step into the completion of that plan. As you see that third part of the process, they will complete that plan that was co-created to address the impacts of that harm and ensure it doesn't happen again. And upon the completion of that plan, the process concludes. And so that is a quick overview of what a process can look like. I hope that was informative, and that's it for me. I'm going to go ahead and pass in order for us to move into our incredible panel of folks who have actually themselves experienced a process such as this.
Thank you so much, Erica. And just to give a very quick, this is why this is so important, because everybody's involved. This is community healing. This is working together. And this is, for those many people out there are coming at this from a justice reform perspective, it is coming together for non-punitive approaches that honor accountability and harm, but also honor the fact that there are root causes and many people involved who should all be part of the healing process. I love that about this, because hurt people, right? We've all heard that. It's the truest thing in the world. I am going to repair some real quick harm that I did by saying I was going to record this and not record this. So, old man with technology alert. I did not push record. We are now going to be pushing record. We're going to have a little break in our in our recording later, but we're going to get the panelists all on the recording. Erica, we'll just have to get that piece later off of Facebook. So why would anybody engage in this, right? This is not what we're taught as Americans. And I think that that's something that a lot of people are probably wondering, why would I go through this whole process and just letting somebody, instead of just letting somebody get locked up? And I think the best way to understand that is by speaking to both people who have repaired harm and people who have had harm repaired through this system. So without further ado, we're going to ask each of our panelists to answer the same question. What was your path to participating in restorative justice healing circles? And what was that process like for you? And I'm going to ask Amanda, would you go ahead and start for us, please?
Yeah, I certainly can. Thanks, Taj. I think everybody's journey is a little different, and mine started about 5 years ago. I honestly can't remember how I heard the term restorative justice or the concept, but I learned about a university in Canada that was offering a restorative justice certificate. And so I actually started taking the certificate because I was very interested in this concept. I had been through the formal justice process when I was a teenager because my family was murdered and I was a witness. I wasn't home that night, otherwise I wouldn't be here either. But so we're now going to be 31 years this July. It's been a long time. And my restorative justice circle, like Erica was talking about, happened 2 years ago now. And so I learned about the concept of restorative justice, thought it was pretty fascinating. Then I mentioned to my victim worker that I was learning about RJ. And so she had said to me, 5 years ago, hey, this is an option if you are interested for you personally. And I was like, thanks, I'm good. So it took a little while. It took me a few years. And I reached out and said, okay, I'm interested. And they connected me with a facilitator. He was a very experienced, especially in cases of serious harm. And he's an absolutely incredible man, sort of one of my heroes now at this point, Dave Gustafson from British Columbia here in Canada. And he walked me through, what this was going to look like. We talked about the process, and it took a while, but eventually we got there. And so we did have a circle together, him and I, and the man who killed my sister and her kids, and then someone else, like a chaplain from the prison. So it was a longish journey for me because it took a long time for me to figure out that it was something that I wanted to do and what it exactly looked like, and then really build yourself up to actually do it, because it was definitely one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. So it took a lot to get there for sure.
What an powerful journey to have overcome, right? This is not vandalism, right? This was something very serious and something that involved you very closely. So thank you, Amanda, for sharing that with us. And thank you for coming on and being vulnerable enough, not just to go through with the process, but for helping others understand about it. Eddie, what about you? What was your path to participating in RJ Healing Circles, and what was that process like for you?
Thank you, Taj, and thank you, Amanda, for being brave and sharing your story. For me, it was a little different for me. I'm coming in this space in a dual situation, meaning my as a child, my father was gunned down and killed. But I also committed harm at the age of 16. And I was arrested, and I faced the rest of my life in prison. And it was in prison where one of my fellow friends had got his hand on some restorative justice information. And we started doing circles when we came out for rec. And our circles consisted of, let's talk about the stuff that we did and what can we do better to help ourselves and to apologize for what we've done to people. And we sat in these circles when we came out for literally probably 3 months to talk about these things. And it was very hard to talk about these things in this space. And we were actually in the highest level prison in the United States, in ADX in Florence, Colorado. So when we came out, we talked about this is what we did. We apologized for what we did. Can we send letters to families, to the courts for family members? But it was in that space that I also became frustrated because I never really got a chance to talk about the harm that was caused to me as a child with me losing my father. So when I came home in 2006, I sought out spaces to try to mend some of the things that I was feeling because I felt incomplete. I found myself apologizing and looking for forgiveness for what I did and trying to heal that way. But the hole that I felt in my heart about my father wasn't being addressed. So I sought out people who were in RJ space, and I got a chance to talk about some of these things in the way that I felt. And I just found, the strength in myself to really heal myself because I would never had a chance to sit down with the person who took my father's life. So I sat around in a circle with folks who had committed harm and who were trying to really apologize and move forward with their life and be better people. And that's how I really got started with trying to get to heal and to be a part of circle keeping, circle work.
Thank you so much, Eddie. And what a brave thing to do to take that leap while you're inside. For those of us who have been inside, I think we all understand that that's never easy to talk about. So I want to salute you for that, and also continuing it. But I think something beautiful here that I want to just point out is from both of these different traditionally perceived as different perspectives, healing is the point. And that's what RJ is really about. And I really appreciate that. And I want to now go ahead over to Charlotta, whose story, just like Amanda's, is one of so much pain, but so much healing and power. So Charlotta, what was your path to participating in RJ Healing Circles, and what was that process like for you?
Yes, thank you for the invitation to be here today, Taj, and amongst the most marvelous panel. I am Charlotta Evans, and what led me to doing a restorative justice dialogue conference was December 21st, 1995. My 3-year-old son was taken from me during a drive-by shooting here in Colorado. And that was by the hands of 3 teenagers who both served life in prison without the possibility of parole. At that time in 1996, they were served that sentence. Several years later, 2009, between 2009 and 2012, I really felt like I had reached the peak of my healing, and I had walked through the stages of my grief and had really revisited so many different things in my grief, and I felt like something was missing. And so I began to ask I had heard about restorative justice. I really wasn't interested. But at that time in '09, I said, yeah, I would like to confront the young man that took my son's life. And it took 3 years of legislative work to make it possible and to make restorative justice law here in the state. And being a forerunner in that and being involved with that was very, just the process was motivating and empowering for me as a victim family, not knowing that I possessed those types of traits as a victim family member, survivor now. And so we were able to pursue that avenue. And that's what got me there. I wanted to sit across the table from the person that caused me harm the most. There were others involved, but he was actually the one that happened to be shooting that gun that night, that teenager. So that led me to a dialogue, and we had an 8-hour dialogue, 2012, May 23rd to be exact. And we had that dialogue, and it formed and morphed into um, a great concept of healing.
Again, I don't even know what to say to your loss, but also to your bravery. Charlotte, thank you so much. To all of you, again, like I'm sitting here just entirely touched. And that was what I was hoping, is because I don't think that anybody can hear the stories of the people on the panel here tonight or restorative justice in general without being intrigued, because we've all been harmed in various degrees, but not always like this. But if we can repair harm in these situations in ways that don't create more harm, why would we not do so? And I just want to honor both of you, especially Amanda, Charlotta, Eddie. You also lost, and I think we all have. Felix, you too. So thank you, the bravery on that side. And Felix, I think you've been doing a lot of this teaching about this for a long time. So why don't we go to you then? And what was your path to participating in RJ healing circles, and what was that process like for you?
Thank you, Taj, and thank you to everyone who shared already. I'm deeply moved, and so much of your stories resonate with me. Uh, I found restorative justice, or rather, restorative justice found me during year 12 of my death by incarceration sentence in a Pennsylvania state prison. I was reading a book for a course I was taking. That was a voluntary course. I just want to name that. It wasn't anything that the prison provided. Uh, and it was a photo essay book of people who had lost loved ones to violence. And I remember sitting in my cell that afternoon doing my weekly reading for this class and sitting on my bunk with the book spread open across my lap, turning page after page, reading heartbreaking story after heartbreaking story, and looking at face after face. And at some point, coming to the realization that I caused a family the same pain I was reading about. Uh, on December 10th of 1995, Charletta, 11 days before your son's life was taken, I took a man's life. And
Mm.
at age 18, I went for that and was subsequently sentenced to death by incarceration. So 12 years later, I'm having this realization because the system in so many ways prevents you from doing that kind of work. It incentivizes deceit and punishes truth telling at every turn. So anyway, I wasn't able to come to that reality for all those years until this afternoon. And so at the end of the book, the author started talking about this thing called restorative justice, and my mind was blown. A way of doing justice that seeks to heal harm by involving those who were directly impacted by it, including the person who caused it. I thought that was revolutionary. My first reaction was, why didn't someone think about this sooner? And I quickly learned that people did. Uh, before before slavery, genocide, and colonization, that's exactly what people were doing on this land and in indigenous lands all across the earth. So my interest was piqued, and that interest quickly became a passion. I met another brother in the prison who is equally passionate about restorative justice, and we co-founded a restorative justice education project to try to introduce as many other people in the prison to restorative justice as possible. So I led that project and facilitated workshops for the next 16 years until my miraculous escape 2.5 years ago. And then I was able to jump straight into my current job as manager of a youth restorative justice diversion program here in Philadelphia. So I get to supervise a team of facilitators and facilitate cases myself of young people who've been arrested for a variety of different harms. They get referred to us by the district attorney's office. We guide them through the process that Erica so eloquently laid out in the intro. And at the end of it, the young people's charges get dismissed and they can go on with their lives, hopefully successfully and happily without the stain of a criminal record or the trauma of having spent any time in a cage. But it's much more than just having a charge dismissed. They get to heal, the people harmed get to heal, and the responsible youth get to hear about the impact of their actions directly from the people who they harmed. Not only the harmed party, but their own loved ones and their mother, their caregiver, whoever comes to the circle with them. And I truly believe, and I've seen that when people get to come face to face with the consequences of their actions in that kind of way, in that kind of space, that they're less likely to do it again. So not only is it a way of trying to heal past harms, but it's also an attempt to prevent future harms.
What a incredible story, but of finding it or having RJ find you, Felix, but also of explaining kind of the bigger picture about that. And I think that's really important for everybody to think about this. Like as human beings, as we came to develop communities, this is how we solved problems. We got the people involved together and came up with solutions together that reduced the harm for everybody and allowed us to move forward in the most healed ways possible, right? Before capitalism and racism and classism and all of these other things that we encounter today created incentives to do otherwise. And before we got into this punitive mindset, this is what we oriented when something went wrong. We oriented ourselves towards healing. And that is what's beautiful here. Whether you're somebody who's having harm repaired or doing the repairing of harm, everybody comes out of this healed. And so I want to get a little deeper into your individual experiences and stories. And I know a lot of times, and for everybody out there who's in the Virginia space here, there's not a lot of this in Virginia. There is some in pockets, and they're doing incredible work where they are, but there's not enough in Virginia. And so where it is, often it's limited in scope. And serious crimes, which they certainly are serious harms, but the way we classify things, those are not always included. And so I want to ask you, Charlotta, you engaged in restorative justice after, I think anybody would agree, one of the most tragic things that could happen to anybody, a very serious harm, one that is not often considered when we think about applying RJ. Why would you recommend this restorative justice for dealing with these really impactful harms in our community, the more serious crimes?
Yes, the reason why I would recommend restorative justice, because it is a vehicle, Taj, of healing, closure, and completeness. This is what I received from restorative justice. The education and the knowledge of it is not widespread enough, as you said. Being a victim family member, knowing that this is available for me, knowing that it was something that was there, I may not have, such as Amanda said, I may not have been ready at the time. But when I was ready, that was the first thing that I reached for. And I began to reach for the experts that came to me and said it's available. And so having that education, having it in the court system with the probation officers, the judges, to express this is an option, and to have that information in hand and in your heart and in your spirit to know it's available, was the most healing for me. It brought me to the end of my journey of healing when I knew that I had to be present for my surviving son. I knew that I had to be present for myself. And so restorative justice is a vehicle of reconciliation. It's a vehicle of completeness and closure. And that is really why I live by it. I live by it. And in any of my expressions, in any of my sharing, I let people know that it's my lifestyle. And by that introduction, it became my lifestyle.
Yeah, so this is how we get to closure in the toughest of circumstances when we're going to need it most. I think that's a really important message. Thank you very much, Charlotta. Um, Eddie, what was it like for you to experience this process as somebody, and you kind of already alluded to this, as somebody repairing harm who was a survivor first but couldn't do this? You talked a little bit about the frustration. I'd like you to elaborate, and then go on with how did being a survivor who did not have this opportunity affect your path and experience until you got that opportunity, or to the degree you have been able to.
Well, again, it was holding me back. It was a process that I wanted to take, and it felt like it was a piece of me that I was leaving behind that I couldn't bring with me because it wasn't being addressed. And what I realized was that I wanted to be different. I wanted to live different. I wanted to have the peace that I deserved in my life. And I knew if I found a way to go through any type of process to help me heal, I had to heal that other part of me, which was the death of my father. That I really it 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 affected my life, really all of my life up until I came home, till I was able to do some restorative work and go to my father's site, and make an amends to myself, and to the people that I've harmed, but also just try to seek some type of um, wisdom while I was there on how to not be angry no more. How I don't want to feel like I want to seek revenge anymore because I felt that all my life. And my mother set me down one day and told me, she said, Eddie, you have to seek the community. It's bigger things that you have to reach. You can't keep letting this hold you down. And what I realized through the work that I'm doing now is like community care work, within my organization. Like as a community, we can help each other heal. And that was part of my process of my healing. With Ghani, with Charlotta. Charlotta have told me many times, Eddie, look, you've changed. That's not who you are anymore. You have to move forward. And that has been a part of my restorative process as well, where she have told me this as a survivor as well. And nobody ever told me that before. And I've always walked with that guilt. No matter, I've been home almost 19 years. I'm not that 16-year-old person anymore, but I was still seeking that validation, but I didn't know where to get it from. But Charlotta said to me, Eddie, you have to move on. And that has been a part of my healing. So for me, I would tell anybody, like, if you've been through any of these things and you're seeking any support through restorative justice and transformative healing, just I think it's very important. I think it's very important. It's going to help your life in so many ways, but the seeds that come from it is so important because we can take those same things and we can help other people around us heal and understand why it's important. So I think it's very important. It's life changing. So I would encourage anyone, if you have the chance to be a part of these circles, a part of these groups who are doing this work.
Thank you, Eddie. I think you hit on something there that Charlotte had hit on too, is that this is how we move forward whole ourselves, and that you can't really go all the way. And then to your point, Charlotte, about lifestyle of this and community, you really emphasized, Eddie. I think, and I will always bring this in, hurt people, right? This is, if we really want to get to a place of healing for all of us and for us all to move forward in a healthy way, we need to all heal. And I think that this is one of the things that's really a strength of RJ. Um, Amanda, I want to come to you next, and I don't know that in the time allotted, everybody had a chance to understand the whole kind of story or caught this, but you, when you went through your circle, you engaged it long after the person who killed your sister and your the rest of your members of your family was already incarcerated, already had their sentence. This was not something to avoid a sentence. This was simply for that, and considerably after the initial sentence had occurred. So what was your goal in pursuing healing this way, so long after the initial harm was caused? And how did it feel to go through it? And ultimately, and again, in such a really tragic and extreme situation, I mean, you're here tonight, so I think people can guess what the answer is, but why was it worth it? How was it worth it? Was it worth it?
Thanks, Taj. The one of the amazing things about restorative justice is that it gives victims an opportunity to answer questions that they have. So something that's very common is that people, want to ask why or want to ask different aspects, maybe about the crime or all kinds of different things. For me personally, there were a lot of things that I knew. So that wasn't that wasn't a piece for me. The main piece for me was that for 27 years I had carried this insurmountable pain of this loss, and I needed to communicate that to him. He had been a part of our family. It wasn't a random stranger, which really kind of made it worse. It was someone you loved and trusted. And so it was an ultimate betrayal to the deepest level. And I needed him to know, the damage that he had left me with. And when you go through a court process in the legal system, it's about the person that committed the harm. It's not really about any of the victims, especially those who were left behind. We're just witnesses to the crime, and we are at the beck and call of prosecutors. And so it's not about us. We get sidelined, and you're left with all of these feelings, and it doesn't go away. Like this pain is gonna stay. I think for the rest of my life, it's a different degree and different level now, and especially, as a part of this process. So that was important. But yeah, so it mattered to me a lot to be able to communicate to him, the deep and profound impacts, and even some of the like daily ways that it impacts my life every day. And he had no concept of any of that. So that was really important for me to be able to just communicate, the harm that he had done and that he had left me with. And there were a lot of things that we both got out of that meeting, and I would absolutely say it was worth it. Like I said, it was definitely the hardest thing I've ever done. It was re-traumatizing. Like it was a lot. I didn't sleep. I did have, a lot of like trauma effects and things that from going through it. But there was a lot that I got out of it that made it worth it. And so I look back and I'm glad that I chose to do that really, really hard thing, because it was absolutely worth it.
Sometimes the hardest things really are. And I really appreciate that from every angle in a crime that occurred, everybody who's here is talking about how this was how we got to me being in a better place, right? This benefits everybody. And I think that that's really important because this is not something, and this is something we always talk about in our work, is that not just restorative justice, but in our reform efforts, um, the same people who who are in communities that have been impacted by crime the most are the same people who are in communities that have been impacted by the justice system most, in from all the different angles, and nobody is treated well. And I think that this is a way that we can get, again, justice reimagined in the sense of a path to healing and system transformation, the name of this episode. So now I'm going to come on to a question for you, Felix. Because you started this teaching inside before you'd even managed to get past your death by incarceration sentence, which I love that language on that. What was it like founding Let's Circle Up while inside, and what responses did you get from others around you? Because I know a lot of people out there are listening from the perspective of being a loved one or formerly incarcerated.
Well, first of all, Taj, doing anti-prison work inside of a prison is extremely difficult, as anyone might imagine. Uh, but fortunately, at the time, we had an administration in the prison that supported programming created and led by those of us who were incarcerated there. I know that that's not typical. Uh, the prison I was in was an anomaly in a lot of ways. And so there was this environment where a couple guys could come together, create an intro to RJ workshop and start inviting people to it. Uh, the workshop quickly morphed into a project almost overnight because the guys loved it. Uh, it was led by us. There were no staff in the room. The pedagogy is extremely experiential and participatory and collaborative. The activities are really fun, so they get us to engage with the topics in a lot of different ways, using different parts of our brains. So people really enjoyed it. They thought it was fun. Uh, as far as getting the men to engage with the material within the workshop, though, uh, it is a challenge because, like almost everyone in society, we've been conditioned to see justice as synonymous with cops, courtrooms, and cages. So it takes a while to get out of that mindset. And I know we're talking about reimagining justice here on this panel. It also requires a lot of unlearning, a few centuries of unlearning to get out of that box and to start thinking about justice in new ways. So it usually takes a few sessions of unpacking the concept of justice and harm and accountability before people can start seeing it in a different light. But once they do, something usually sparks. And most of the alumni who have completed our at least our intro to RJ workshop leave that experience empowered and uh, knowing that restorative justice isn't only something that they have to be invited to or that they have to be part of some process to engage with, but that it's a way of life. We harm people and we're harmed every single day. And every time a harm occurs, there's an opportunity for restorative justice. At the end of the day, it's about having an obligation to put things more right whenever we hurt people. Uh, and so once people start to look at it in that way, they see that it's something that they can do with their families and their communities, or even before they leave prison on the cell blocks.
Yeah, I think this is a really great lesson because I think a lot of people view this as a way, erroneously view this as a way of to avoid a sentence, right? But this is not the easy way out. This is the accountable way out if you're the person who's caused harm. And I think that it doesn't have to apply just to crimes. And I think, and we'll maybe at another time talk about the education, and there's many other realms where we can do this. But I think it's really interesting because I think even in our own communities, we've been so socialized to this idea of a punitive approach is the justice thing, that like look at our movies, like every hero in every movie, and even if they're in law enforcement, is supposed to exact violence as response to violence that has occurred, right? We really put this punish people mindset up, but even in our own work we need to do this within our own communities. Even within the reform community, often we step on each other's toes, and it's a really good idea, instead of just being mad at each other and letting the harm continue, to do this. And so I'm going to say this: we're working on practicing that lifestyle here at the Humanization Project, wherever we can. And I'm asking everybody out there to also do this in our own lives, even when it doesn't involve the justice system directly. And I'm going to get off my soapbox now there and say, yes, I like the idea of lifestyle here. And I'm going to come back to you, Eddie, for another question. Your journey towards RJ began informally while you were still inside. What led you to find those principles independently, and how did they help you through your incarceration?
Uh, what led me to find I wanted to heal. I truly wanted to heal. I felt like I was emotionally suffering for so many years. And I tell people this, most Americans couldn't stay in their house during COVID. So you talking about being in solitary confinement for 10 years and have to face yourself, the things you've done, the guilt that you carry. And in my case, the decedent's aunt, who was this caretaker, asked the judge to have leniency on me and my co-defendant because we were children. Please allow them the opportunity to do something with their life after they finish their time in jail. And for many years, I couldn't forgive myself. I couldn't forgive myself. So I had to find a way to heal. And I tell people being in solitary confinement is not a easy thing, especially for 10 consecutive years. And I had to keep seeking different ways, finding things around peace studies, meditation, more materials around restorative processes. And I went back to my first experience with a circle actually when I was like 9 years old. My neighbor brung like 20 kids together and said it was nothing wrong and said, listen, as a community, this is what you can do to help your friend. And it wasn't until I got older that I said, that's what she did with us. She put us in a circle and told us, listen, we understand that everybody may not have money to go to the pumpkin patch or to the movies. So if you have a cord and you decide to put 2 cents, 5 cents, or whatever you put in there, it's going to help your friend be able to go with you. So that was my first experience with a circle when I was a child. And this same neighbor, she still do circles with her family in the community to this day, but it became something that was important to me. I knew if I didn't have a process that helped me get through what I was going through, I knew that I wouldn't make it out of prison. Whether I made it out physically was one thing, but emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, I probably would never have made it out of prison. And that's what, seeking this process out did for me. And as I came home, I tried to make sure I was creating spaces around community care and healing spaces for people can heal, especially for those of us who came out of the prison systems. And I think it's a very important process. I think the process helped me. And my colleague Gani, he's helped me so much in this space to grow, to understand it more. Again, Charlotta has as well. So for me, I'm continuing to seek it out because it has helped me to this point, and I wanted to continue to help me, and I want to help others.
Yeah, it helped you get through your bid in a better place, right? It helped you actually survive. That's fantastic. Thank you, Eddie. Charlotta, I wanted to ask you because you referred to it briefly, but didn't really get a chance to elaborate. What prompted you to take this experience of wanting to have harm repaired, I guess is the order of operations here, all the way to the level of getting it passed in Colorado and advocating for it, to expand as you have?
Um, so once as I spoke before, once I reached the peak of my healing, I wanted to pursue that to see if it was for me. And so with that exposure of it, finding out, gaining the education and knowledge of it, and then actually experiencing it, it was more than what I expected. I got out of it more. And then so once the death of my son, um, and knowing that it was teenagers that did this, I was going face to face with a grown man that I had heard throughout the years. He had kind of was born into this gang life style. It wasn't something he could actually choose. He was born into it. He really didn't have the support that he needed, being incarcerated as a child. And I had really experienced a spiritual enlightenment at the beginning of the harm of my son, my 3-year-old Kason Xavier Evans. I experienced that. And so I had forgiven um, the young man that had taken my son's life. And I wanted to go and see him and let him know where that forgiveness comes from. I wanted him to heal well, such as I had. And I wanted to share with him what my woes were, what my pains were, what my family suffered, what the community suffered. And I was able to do that in this dialogue. And I just, one main example that I could bring that I could share, Taj, with the audience is this. After the dialogue, I could think about my 3-year-old son and who he was and remember him again after I had that dialogue. Prior to that, all I could think about was that gory night, him bleeding out on me, him taking his last breath in my arms. That's all I could think about. But after that dialogue, that's why I call it closure, because sometimes people say there is no closure in losing a loved one, but I experienced that through RJ dialogue. So after that night, I could think about Kason, his first words, what he would run and play, his little personality when he was just learning to like what he was eating, and he was in that stage being 3 years old, and I was able to get there again, and I was so grateful for that experience because of that alone. So yes, that's why I wanted to go there. I really had a lot of compassion for the teenagers that took my son's life because they were babies. And I wanted to go and touch his hands. I knew that was something that I needed for furthering my healing. I needed to touch that young man's hands. And as I touched his hands, I was able to pray over his hands, which that wasn't even a part of the plan. But these are all the things that I gained from that dialogue. And that's why I shared.
Thank you. I don't know that there's a better way to express in human terms why this is important than that. This is apropos of nothing, but maybe everything at once. I did not know that you had, but I wanted, it's kind of a wonderful universe coming together, coincidence. My brother, just had my new nephew, or just became a father to my new nephew named Kason Alexander, just a couple weeks ago.
Oh,
So that's kind of nice. It's not meaningful, but maybe it is. And I just want to share that with you in this moment. I did not know this, but I do want to kind of bring this to you as well, Amanda, um, because I think it's also shaped your life since. How, you went through this incredible journey after such a long time, after such a tragedy, and now here you are. But I think it's more than that. How has having pursued RJ in the first place shaped your life since?
Charlotta, that's beautiful and amazing. And I think one thing that's misconceived about restorative justice is the word, restorative, because people think, well, how can you restore? In situations like this, especially when there's such a loss, like you can't bring those people back. So it's not a restoration to what was, but it is a restoration to wholeness, especially from us. And so that's really important, is like those 3 questions, of who was harmed, like what do we need? What do I need to be whole again moving forward, because you can't go back. So what does that look like? And one of the things for me, especially, I carried a lot of fear. I mean, I was not supposed to live. The plan was for me to not be here anymore. And I testified against him at the trial. I was 16 years old, trying to graduate high school and going through a murder trial. And so I carried a lot of fear that, one day he'll get out and he'll come for me. And I remember when I walked into the room, because I had said, there were certain things I wanted, and I never wanted him to stand over top of me because I was scared. And so we went in and sat the chairs where I wanted them to, and then my worker and I left. And then he came in with the chaplain, and they sat down, and then we entered. And so he was sitting when I entered, and the first thing that I noticed was how much he was shaking. And that instant took so much out of my mind that I had carried. I mean, I did know him before, but this whole thing had created him as this terrifying monster in my mind. And walking in there, it humanized him again. He's not this terrifying monster. He's just Dean. And it's actually Dean who's scared, and that was a weird thing for me. Like, why would he be scared? And we're in a institutional setting, like, it was such a something I had never conceived of. And it changed so much for me, even just that very first moment of walking in that room. But then talking with him and talking about my fears and being able to say to him, like, I'm afraid, and things would fall in my house and my brain would go into this terror mode. He's here, he's in the house. Those kinds of things, like little things, like I said, like that happened to me. But through talking to him, we were able to sort of talk that through, and it alleviated that fear. And I don't live like that anymore. I don't live afraid anymore. I still also get angry, but I don't live with anger anymore. It's lifted off of me so many things that I was carrying that were keeping me from wholeness. And then also, combining that with sort of PTSD therapy, and dealing with, almost like an imposter syndrome, but actually for my life, like feeling like you're not actually supposed to be here. And so realizing that, no, I am supposed to be here. And so as I do events like this, as I share my story with people, as I meet with other victims or meet with people who are incarcerated, because I do now a lot of justice work with incarcerated individuals, that has also continued to bring me healing and freedom. And I'm so appreciative for that. I wouldn't have gotten that without this process. So that's why it's so unique, and it's important because you can't get these things anywhere else. So it's brought a lot of purpose and meaning to the pain that I still have and that I still will carry, but it's not controlling my life anymore. It's not controlling or factoring into my decisions anymore. But I'm using it to bring help and healing to others, and that is so meaningful to me, that even though I can't bring my sister and the kids back, like, I know my sister's so proud of who I am as a person and what I'm doing, and that is so helpful and healing to me.
She most certainly is, and we are most certainly glad you are here for this reason. Thank you, Amanda. I'm not going to say anything. I think that story speaks for itself. Unfortunately, I have to put you on the spot after that, Felix. Why do people need to? Because we both, Charlotta and Amanda, have just recently described the process in very granular way that is, and the importance of that. Why do people need to engage the process fully to understand the benefits of RJ?
Yeah. Well, like most things in life, uh, it's hard to believe until we see or experience it, especially because of what you were naming earlier, Taj, and America's fetish with violence. It's hard to imagine that something other than violence would work when we are harmed. And so I have the incredible privilege of witnessing these awesome transformations uh, with responsible parties and harmed parties as they walk through the process. And whereas the responsible youth and their caregivers have a lot more incentive on the front end for participating, when the alternative is to sit in front of a judge, the people harmed enter into this 100% voluntarily because they want to. And it's not always an easy sell. There's usually a lot of hesitation uh, and skepticism that have to be overcome. Uh, and that happens through time and through conversations and through working together. And I've at the outset had the initial phone call with people harmed who would say, "Oh no, like, this isn't something I want to do. Uh, I think they should be punished." And I'll just try to hold on and say, "All right, well, can we at least meet? Can we talk about it?" And then we'll have a conversation, and I'll try to explain what some of the benefits might be for them. And then they might say, "Yeah, okay, I'll try." But to go from that all the way to at the end of a circle, hearing them say, "I feel so much lighter. I feel like I can move on. I'm so glad I decided to participate in this." And that's across the board, the reaction at the end of the circles, from everyone who participates. They say that this huge weight has been lifted off of them. And every time I sit there listening to these things, I'm also thinking about how, had these cases gone the other way, no one would have been feeling any of these things. Everyone would have been angry and frustrated and unsatisfied and re-traumatized and re-victimized and all the things. But yet here we are, sitting in a circle, accomplishing the complete opposite. And it might take more time, more love, more care, obviously, but at the end, it's worth it. There's no question about that, to me. But people just have to take that chance, right? It might even seem like a risk at first, but with large risk, usually comes a large reward.
Yeah, it sounds almost kumbaya-ish, but where we find our greatest peace and understanding is in small circles around each other, around a fire with each other. I mean, going all the way back in time, right? This is where we find our best moments. And so I think that the process is you have to experience, but you don't have to go through it in a criminal sense. You can just go through healing circles in any capacity. I think lifestyle, like we were saying. And so I want to come to you, Charlotta, because I think we didn't get a chance to talk to this, but you actually, your work, your ongoing work now, involves the person who was responsible for the harm originally at times in your life. Your ongoing work in your life now includes that person. So, what has it meant to you to be able to work today with the man who was responsible for harm that was so central in your life?
One thing that was very genuine and life lasting, as well as the restorative justice process. In the middle of that process, Taj, I accepted this young man as my son, and being able to embrace him, knowing what he needed. He had asked me, would I be his mother many years prior. I could not answer that because I let him know I'm Kason's mom, and I'm Calvin's mom, my surviving son, Calvin. And there in that dialogue, um, 2012, May 23rd, I accepted Raymond Johnson as my son. My surviving son accepted him as a brother. And for 10 years, he was yet still incarcerated. And we would talk daily. I would put money on his books, advocated with that relationship that I built with the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth, how they grounded me and taught me so many things. I was able to be instrumental with the national change with the juvenile lifers and the resentencing process at the US Supreme Court level. That was great legislation and experience for and on the behalf of Raymond Johnson after I accepted him as my son. Then we did the local work here with probation and making it retroactive in legislation for him to get out. And that work was great and fulfilled. Raymond Johnson has been out for 3 years now. From the day he walked out of that prison, and even 10 years prior, he has been my son and I'm his mom. And we have had the privilege to travel together, speak together, eat together, cry together, and share on a regular basis, day to day. And we are the epitome of restorative justice daily. We always confront anything that brings up a matter. He confronts it, I confront it, and that's our relationship. And so we go and we speak. We just had a speaking engagement yesterday, and we just consistently share our journey. And we say it's Kayson's story, but it's our journey. And so that work continues on. And as Amanda said, I work with the other juvenile lifers that have not yet been released. I work with them on their self-care, their spirituality, and making sure they're equipped for whatever comes their way. If it's clemency, if it's pardoning, if it's what all the other 35 C's and all of those things that can come their way for possibility of release. So I work with those here in the state of Colorado, as well as Raymond does. He's full time working in the community, always reaching out a hand to help, such as I prayed for him there in that dialogue, that his hands help and lift up and never cause harm again. And he's doing just that in his mind, heart, soul, and spirit. I'm so proud of him. Um, it's a remarkable expression of grace and forgiveness, and with the help of God and being an instrument, and then also with the instrument and the vehicle of restorative justice, my life has been one of great I don't even know what to say. Life is good. Life is good.
It's amazing that you say that right now. And I think that if anybody who can hear your whole story, your Kayson's story, your journey, um, I think would be convinced to scrap the old system and just do this. And it sounds like you're getting people to do that every time you talk about it, honestly. So thank you. So we're just so everybody knows, uh, we're a couple minutes behind. We were planning on ending at 9:30, but I want there to be a time for question and answers. We're gonna have one more planned question, then a little bit of explanation of what a couple of the organizations that are here with us are doing on the ground. And then we're going to get to some questions at the end. So everybody, we've got a few already lined up. If you got any coming, get them out now and get them into the chat. Last planned question for you, Eddie, though. You lead the community care work at CFSY. It's not exactly RJ, but it relates to RJ work. And so how is that related? And how do these broader principles of RJ benefit our communities, even when it's not in this particular approach?
Well, thank you for that question. Well, approximately 7 years ago, going 8 years ago when I started at CFSY, I lost a friend to suicide who had done 19 years on death row. He came home, he's exonerated. And we used to go around the country and speak together. And what I realized is that a lot of people ask us to tell our stories, but never really thought about how we felt or how traumatizing and triggering these things could be for us. And when I came to CFSY, I asked my director at the time, Jody Kinlady, can we do something around self-care, community care? And she's like, she was an innovator, period. Let's do it. And I was like, wow, let's do it. I was just asking you. I wouldn't expect you to say yeah right away, but she did. And we created spaces for people to heal. We had social workers in space. We talked about vulnerability, the things that we did, how we harmed people. And we also talked about the things we want to do in our life. And Incarcerated Children Advocacy Network is a family of former life sentence children who were sentenced to these extreme sentences when they were 17 and younger. And what's the same as here? Healing, community, accepting your responsibility for what you did. And many ICANN members have had the chance to go through restorative practices to talk to the survivor family members and also their victims as well. But we have, Ghani here working with us, who's doing wonderful work around THRJ, Transformers Healing Justice work. So he's helping us lead this work, train family members and ICANN members alike to be able to be, and Bree as well, and Jody, we want to plant seeds so we can help this thing sprout, so we can help people be the best people we can, help build more practitioners in the community. And I tell people, for me, uh, it should be more people in the community doing this work than it is any other, people that's in the community. And I'm just not seeing the people in the communities. It's just not enough. That's why we lean on certain organizations across the country so much, but they only have the bandwidth to do what they're able to do, the greatness they're able to do. But the more we're able to build this out for more people, I think, the community can heal even more. So that's the way we bring it together. And Donnie and I bring our work together to make sure it's touching each other and touching the work and touching the people. So that's how the self-care and THRJ work come together.
It's a lifestyle. The lifestyle. Right? Yeah. Thank you, Eddie. All right. So that's it for the plan questions. We're going to do organizational spotlights here in just a moment, but I really like this flow that this conversation is going. I want to pose a few of the questions that have already come in. So if you got other questions, please get them in now. And one of them, real quick, I will just answer. It was already put in the chat, but the book that Felix mentioned earlier that he had read inside was called Transcending by Howard Zinn. That was the answer to that question. I don't want to, we can elaborate on that if we have more time at the end, but I think there's more stuff for RJ specific that I want to get to. There was a really good question that I think was put maybe part of an answer into the chat, but I'm actually going to call Erica, call you up on this one if you don't mind. What if the person who is harmed or the person who caused harm does not get to a point in their growth or healing that they are willing to participate in an RJ circle? Can the person who was harmed or caused harm participate without the other party?
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, I apologize for how dark this room is. I use sunlight to light it. But yeah, they really can. And I saw there was a half answer in the chat just around the use of surrogates. That's a really common way to enable the person who caused harm or the person who was harmed to sit with someone who has experienced a similar harm to the one they caused, or who caused a similar harm to the one they experienced, and be able to speak kind of about the impact and hear someone actually speak as kind of a proxy for the person harmed or the person who caused the harm. And it can help them, better understand one another and the perspectives, but also the impacts that harm had on themselves, and get an opportunity to hear someone speak from experience, even if it wasn't the experience of the actual harm, that person who was on the other side of it is not showing up to participate in. So that's a common way that programs still create the opportunity for a dialogue, even when all parties aren't necessarily at the point of stepping in.
Thank you very much, Erica. And this was a kind of a broad philosophical question that I think is really ties into some of the stuff that you were saying, Felix, and that we were discussing about the origins of this. I'm wondering, this is from Michelle Wright, I am wondering if there's movement towards more community, non-diversion or post-conviction programs like it was practiced before colonization to reduce contact with the criminal legal system. I don't know who wants to answer that. I think you probably all could. Why don't whoever feels excited about answering it, go ahead. I don't want to assign that to anybody.
Well, I know Kimiko had put something in the chat in response to that with the work that they're doing down in Restorative Arlington. I mean, for me, that's the dream. That's the vision for the future, is to be able to have restorative justice practitioners and practices readily accessible to anyone whenever a harm occurs. I would love it if on every block there was a space where people could come to and say, look, I just experienced this harm over here, you know, do you have some facilitators who can help? And then people will be ready to spring right into action. You know, I mean, that's true restorative justice, right? Right now, when doing diversion, you know, we're trying to pull our people out of the mouth of the beast, because you know it's hungry, and it wants every poor black and brown body it can get its mouth on. Uh, so we look at it as, you know, having to do it this way to rescue our people. But in an ideal scenario, right, we wouldn't have to, and you know, people would have this available. And to get there, people have to first learn about what restorative justice is. Uh, there are a lot of organizations out here doing the practice and not a lot actually educating people on restorative justice, which is something I want to focus on out here in Philadelphia, where so much harm occurs, and you know, people continue to support politicians who talk about locking more people up, and that being the way to safety, because we don't know anything else, you know. And so when we're fearful, and we legitimately are, we're gonna go ahead and you know, vote for something that isn't in our best interest, time and time again. So we're gonna need a mass educational campaign to bring people up to speed on what RJ is, and that there is this other way of doing it, that not only builds community but makes us all more healthy.
Education, very important. I think, what do you guys all think about we get together a panel to present on human terms what RJ is like sometime and broadcast to that people? Maybe that would be a good idea. So that's what we're doing. And thank you all for we got one more question in the chat, but I just love that tie-in because that is the point here. Is let's introduce this to people who might not understand it because we have not been taught this. We've been taught against it. We've been socialized away from this idea. And so and don't forget, episode 2, we'll be talking with more people who are involved in the RJ process from even broader perspectives, but see benefits for all of the people in our community, from law enforcement all the way to indirectly affected loved ones when harm occurs. That's in 2 weeks on the 18th, same time, same partners, different panel, but again, it's going to be incredibly inspiring, although I don't know it will have quite the same level of human heart reaching that these stories have, maybe, but I think it's still going to be really inspiring. The last question, and I don't know the best way to present this, but somebody offered an example where somebody engaged in some really stupid, reckless behavior that without any intent to harm, and ended up being prosecuted for malicious wounding and um, ends up with a felony conviction, but he's not been allowed to meet the person harmed or to try to make amends. And he's also being sued for $1 million for the harm done. And so the question ultimately is, are monetary settlements ever a part of the RJ process? Erica, I think this is probably a question for you at this moment.
Yeah, they absolutely can be a part of the restorative justice, the restorative plan that comes out of the conference. I do want to name that a part of really understanding the impacts of harm with a person who has been harmed is, as multiple folks have named, right? Really thinking like, okay, yes, there has been a financial impact. What are the other impacts, be they emotional or physical, spiritual, but also, is there something that can be done that can address this financial impact that might not be financial in the traditional sense? So you really try to really break apart kind of what ultimately would feel restorative, because it is simply the case that there are folks who aren't going to be able to show up to the financial harm, but they can show up in these other beautiful ways, and maybe they will be able to meet some financial need over time. And so how can we do this? Restorative justice is relational healing and relational accountability, right? The system is, you go in different doors, you sit on different sides, never shall you talk. Anything you say or do can be used against you. And I'm going to go through a court of law and put $1 million restitution bill on your lap that you're probably not able or going to pay. Very few survivors get any sort of financial recompense through the system. Whereas we see in restorative justice that actually there's a much higher likelihood of receiving some financial restitution, while also being able to excavate all the other ways that we experience harm that are not financial, that would have never been responded to through the traditional process. So yes, it can be a part, and there is a real effort to understand, like, what are the other ways that someone can help restore, as as maybe the program and other resources are looked to in order to meet what could be a financial need.
Again, a kind of nuanced and individualized community-based decision. I think that that's, again, the lifestyle, right? That's what we're talking about. And thank you, Erica. So that's going to be it for our questions. We don't have any more coming in, but I do want to, and something we're going to do this week and then even more of in 2 weeks, is provide an opportunity for, we've heard the human story, but there's also these incredible organizations doing incredible work here in Virginia, which we'll hear more about next week, but also on a national and even international scale. So I want to give a chance for two organizations tonight to have an organizational spotlight. Amanda, you're here representing your own story, but you're also here as a member of Survivors for Justice Reform and a number of other ways in which you work on this. So I want to first give you a few minutes to spotlight organizational work that you would like to, and then we'll hear a little bit about Erica's, the work of EJUSA and Erica that Erica has been instrumental in working on. So Amanda, please.
Thanks, Taj. So we're a global collective of survivors of sexual violence, domestic violence, and human trafficking, and allies who stand for justice reform. We advocate for options beyond the carceral system, like restorative and transformative justice, because one size does not fit all when it comes to justice. Marley Liss, a member of the Survivors Council Canada who experienced restorative justice after sexual violence, founded this coalition because the criminal justice system is failing. Rates of sexual violence have not declined in 20 plus years. Less than 2% of sexual assault cases end with legal sanctions through court. Less than 6% of survivors report due to fear of retaliation and lack of safety and trust with law enforcement. This is especially true for 2S LGBTQIA and BIPOC survivors who are often dismissed. They're often blamed and even criminalized when reporting victimization. So 88% of advocates report that survivors are re-traumatized through the court system. We also know that the punitive system uses dehumanization and non-consensual process in its attempts to end dehumanization and violated consent. So too often individuals justify violence toward harm doers in the name of survivors. The truth is, survivors are not a monolith. Our needs and wants differ. We are here to show the world that not all survivors want carceral or punitive outcomes. It's time to shift this perception in order to enhance access to alternative justice pathways. So as a collective, we lead with hope and humanity. We recognize the harm caused by carceral systems. We stand for transformative and restorative justice options beyond the punitive system. So for those who want to get involved with the coalition, you can learn more at Survivors for Justice Reform. We're on all social media platforms, and you can find information about an upcoming event in partnership with Gatehouse called Survivors Voices. So it's an amazing and powerful collective. And so, yeah, find out more for Survivors for Justice Reform.
Yeah, and I encourage everybody who's in our normal viewership to absolutely, especially, and most of us are survivors ourselves of even violent crime who have been incarcerated. So in the Humanization Project's orbit, I encourage you, if you are a survivor, to get involved, because survivors are not a monolith, and this is a good way to make a system that responds to everybody. And actually, there is a Virginia chapter, and actually many of you may recognize Fatima. The esteemed and awesome Fatima is actually the Virginia state rep. So you will be comfortable and you will know people. So I want to give Fatima a huge shout out for her work leading that as well. And thank you, Amanda, for sharing that and doing it on an international level. International level. I want everybody to notice that. Like this is something we're really working towards as globally, and we really need to here in America. And one of the organizations here in the United States that continues to do really lead on this front is EJUSA, Equal Justice USA. And Erica, you've met before. Erica, do you want to introduce the video, or do you want to just go ahead and I'm going to pass it to you. You introduce the video, and then we will show everybody the.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm glad we have time for that. So, hi again. Yeah, so I work for an organization called Equal Justice USA. It is a national organization, and we work to transform the justice system by promoting responses to violence that actually break cycles of harm. And so I specifically work on the Restorative Justice Project at EJUSA. We are a collective of folks who partner with communities across the country. Some of those communities represented in this call right now, but we partner with local community to just add whatever assistance, capacity, technical assistance, training, whatever we can help them do in order to support their development of restorative justice diversion programs. And so we have partners from across the country. I am going to put in the chat our online toolkit, which is a toolkit that is designed to support communities. So if you and some folks in your community want to build restorative justice diversion, we have an online toolkit that takes you step by step through that process. But what we do is we support folks in their communities who want to build a different way, a way that actually, addresses harm without sowing the seeds of future harm. And so that's what we do. And this is a video, a quick short video that just talks about some of those communities and allows them to speak about the work from their own perspective and their own experience. And so, yeah, I'll have Taj or Fatima cue that up. And yeah, thank you, everyone.
The way that we're going about addressing harm and addressing crime and addressing violence is deeply flawed. It exacerbates the situation. It's not stopping the violence. As the sentencing goes up, so does the violence. There's a different way to address this.
There's been so much harm from punishing people, and it's such an old way of being. Like, it goes back into our times of slavery. More harm is being caused and nothing's getting resolved.
At EJUSA, we are working with communities across the country to develop restorative justice diversion programs that support healing and accountability. From California to Philadelphia, from Nashville to New Orleans, EJUSA is working with a network of partners to show that restorative justice is a more impactful way to build communities and keep them safe.
It's just such a step forward in terms of what we do as regards prosecution, to recognize that we have to figure out how to make people both better on the one hand, that is people who do bad things, but also how to restore people back who were victims.
There's 4 areas of harm that we were looking to address. That's the one that we have to ourselves, to our family, to our person harm, and to our community. So we bring in people into the space that are stakeholders that are gonna help hold the youth accountable.
We help them learn what it means to account for harm that they've caused. It's not just looking at another person and saying, I'm gonna do something to you and therefore that's accountability, I held you accountable. No, we must have processes that invite people to learn what it means to account for what they have done.
I had to own up to what I did, speak about what I did, meet the person that was harmed in the instance. And you had to look that person in their face, accept that, and go about it. And that was the only way for it to be complete. It was part of the plan. Like, y'all just told me what I did, and yeah, it hurt knowing y'all just like, yeah, you did that. But you gotta hear it.
deserve second chances and redemption. Even if you feel like they don't deserve that second chance, do it for yourself.
Mistakes happen, and a part of being a person in the community is to step up and make that mistake right. Do better the next time. Help the person that you hurt and the community at large.
I get pushback a lot. Like, well, you're just slapping people on the wrist. You're not doing anything. And I said, but our crime rates for our juveniles are down. In 2013, we were arresting about 4,000 kids a year, if not more. At the end of 2021, that number was down to 1,000. And that means that we're doing a lot of intervention and prevention work so that it doesn't get that way.
It's more than just about repairing the harm or reconciling differences around this specific incident. It's also about sowing the seeds that could turn into something transformative, that could change the situations and the conditions that's breeding violence and victimization in our community.
So I'm really excited because that was the perfect segue into two of the people featured in that video will be joining us next week. Both Gani and Travis will be on, or not next week, in 2 weeks on the 18th. Next Sunday is Mother's Day, and you better all not pay attention to me and better love on your moms. I will say that. Thank you all. Like, I spoke with everybody on this panel beforehand, and I knew these stories a little bit. But every time I've learned another word and another bit of perspective and seen the bravery of all of you joining us and sharing your journeys. I even doing this every day, I'm overwhelmed by what I've seen here tonight. And I thank everybody for joining us. I thank everybody out there for watching, and please encourage other people to watch. This is a way of reimagining justice. It is a path to healing and system transformation. And it is even potentially we're working on here in Virginia. So I want to give, does anybody, I guess just let's do it by hands, want to say a word to everybody? And otherwise, I'm going to say good night. And anybody who wants to jump in, please go ahead and do so.
Yes, I'd like to jump in and say that the transformative healing, restorative justice, and the campaign for fair sentencing of youth is right next door to you, Virginia. So we're there with the information, the education, and the validation if you need it.
Well, I don't see anybody else. It's late. So I'm just going to thank you all again. Thank you. It has truly been an honor. Please tune in 2 weeks. Spread the word. Transformative healing, restorative justice to lifestyle. Everybody have a good night.